here. Still cool. The azaleas in full bloom. The irises are coming. Anyway, we're fortunate to have with us Sonny Hebert from Pecan Island.
How you doing,
Sonny,
Harold?
thank you for being
Uh,
here.
Enjoy being here with you.
Tell us what it was like to grow up around Pecan Island before the road was built.
From what I know now, it's like living in another century. There was about 3 or 5 old cars down there. We'd have to go back and forth to town. We had an old mail boat that would run 3 times a week
The mailboat would go
to
from,
Abbeville.
yeah,
They had the Corps of Engineers, I guess, around the turn of the century in the early 1900s, I guess, or maybe even before that, dug a canal from White Lake up to Pecan Island, and then they cross White Lake and go up into Schooner Bayou, get in the bay, cross the bay, get in the Vermilion River, pass by Intracoastal City, and some of the people had cars parked there, and they could get out in Intracoastal City, I guess old Shell Morgan landed,
yeah.
and take off and drive to town and get there a little earlier than the old boat, and then the rest of the people would ride the boat on up to Abbeville, get there in the afternoons, evening, and used to be Main Street was right off the river, and that's where had some stores and whatnot, and they knew the days that the mailboat had come to town, so they would stay open late. People had to shop. Maybe an old dentist or two stayed open, a doctor or two, had whatever you needed. You would take care of it that evening, spend the night in town. They had the Audrey Hotel, but they also had some boarding houses where you could spend the night, and then the next morning by daylight, they'd load the old mailboat up and go back to the island another day's trip, going back to Pecan Island. It's a big difference today.
And Ivy Richard ran that old boat.
Okay.
Yeah, he was about, I guess, around 15 when he was running the boat.
Yeah.
He
They-
ran it for about 5 years.
They had
And there was a lady, the Indians before the war came to the marsh and they arrived with the geese and they left with the geese.
really.
Yeah, and there was a lady that had learned their language, and she would get a list from them, and they'd buy their traps or their 22 bullets or their shotgun shells and their pots and pans and
Yeah, the supplies.
yeah, the supplies. And she would trade them their furs.
Barter with them.
She'd barter with them, yeah.
But
So I interviewed Ivy Richard, I guess, and in about 1950, Ivy went to Houston he had cancer. And they opened him up and they put him back up. They said, we'll give you about 3 months to live and you're gone. And Tom Elba's son and I guess Howard Moniz and all those guys were really friendly with Ivy, so they came back with him. They'd gone with him to
Yeah.
Houston, and he lived to about 90 years age.
yeah, well, that's good for the doctor to be wrong in that direction.
Yeah,
But early on, like but when I came around, like the trapping, that's how a lot of people made their living down there, trapping the winter months, and everybody had an old cow or two, or a few cows, selling calves once in a while. But I guess in the 20s, 30s, maybe everybody was trapping muskrats. You had a lot of high marsh,
yeah,
and then I remember Dad telling me about the first time a nutria was caught down there.
yeah,
The nutria had just recently escaped, and then it later became a cash crop,
yeah.
and now they seldom see a nutria out there or a muskrat or anything.
The muskrat was their biggest catch.
Yeah, early, yeah,
They'd get a dollar and a half or $2, but they'd catch 150 muskrats
yeah.
a day. So
that was a lot of, it wasn't a marsh like it is now. It was like a high marsh, had a good, water, wasn't much water on it. And, that they would, and it was all walking.
Yeah.
They had set their traps in the marsh and, but
Yeah.
it wasn't ditches all over, with power boats, you would have to walk your trap line,
Yeah,
catch a rat, set your trap, skin it while you walk and put
Yeah.
your fur in a sack, get to the next one. You would make your round and go back to the camp and stretch and, stretch
they
and,
put them on, they had muskrat, I guess it was spring loaded.
yeah, muskrat mold, it just shaped where it had tension on it. You pinch it, slip it up in there kind of like a little horseshoe,
Yeah.
slip it up in there and release it and it'd stretch the hide.
And I think those old trappers, they couldn't read cat or spell dog, but they knew how the marsh worked. And when somebody would dam up a bayou, that was the end of their trapping.
Yeah,
I remember we would go, and we were real friendly with the trappers, because those days you get permission from the trappers,
to hunt, yeah.
And old man Toops had a trapper's cabin. I think it was in Coal Bayou, about a half a mile from by Schooner Bayou.
Oh, okay,
And the duck hunters came in and they had leased the land from the McLennans, but they had it was one of the mud companies, and they had the resources to build dams. And they built a dam right in front of old man Toop's cabin. And we went to the cabin, and we'd get on the top of early in the morning, right at sunrise, we'd get on top of his cabin and with binoculars and watch for the geese, And we went there, and hunting season was way before, the trapping season opened about a month before the hunting season.
yeah.
And Toops wasn't there, and we'd bring him eggs and Coke and, whatever, and kind of bribe those guys. And so anyway, a couple of days later, I'm in Abbeville getting groceries or something, and there's Toops, I said, "You're not trapping this year?" Said, "Nope." Said, "The duck hunters put that dam in there, and it changed the marsh, and now all the muskrat are gone."
Moved out.
Yeah.
I guess it was probably in
See, when you take away the title exchange, you're eliminating 90% of the vegetation, and you're creating an impoundment. But the duck hunters didn't want the low tide to
drain their marsh.
drain their
Yeah.
marsh.
The last time I saw someone trapping was about in the 60s, and it was about a 2 or 3 mile square. Still had good high marsh, and it was covered in muskrat beds, but it wasn't but about a 3 mile square. The rest of the marsh was all starting to break up. But that's been, what, 60, 70 years ago, 60 years ago, I guess. Well, yeah, the marsh has changed a lot. Well, you was there with us a few years back running crab traps in
Yeah.
24, 30 inches of water where we used to have cattle roaming out there. The marsh has definitely changed a lot in my lifetime.
But you can go on the south, on that road on the south side of the island, where you can see the cattle, the fences and cattle guards and all that out there in the water.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you'll go to one spot and it's all pasture.
Yeah,
And you wonder what's the difference? I think the parish they could get canals dredged for nothing. So the farmers with cattle would get these canals dredged, and then they would pump it off,
yeah, pump it off, dry it out, then it'll
dry it
break
out,
up.
and then, of course, you're doing away with, you're doing the worst thing possible, because dehydration of a marsh is the death of the marsh,
Yeah, you pump it dry for 2 years, maybe 3 years, then water come back on it, but you'll never see the ground again. It's already compressed
That's right.
16, 18 inches, and
That's
it will
right.
never rehydrate. I mean, it'll rehydrate, but it's like back clay. It doesn't,
You remember the DeWitt Canal?
oh yeah, I remember it well.
They closed that thing off.
Yeah,
They closed rollover. They only left one big opening. I guess that's at Joseph's Harbor, huh?
yeah, correct. It's still open. But the DeWitt Canal, I guess mid '60s thereabout, they independent cattleman got a drag line to plug it up so his cattle could cross the canal, but kind of under the radar. And so some fellas I know went out there with dynamite and blew it out of there. Just blew it up, and the water was passing. Well, the independent cattleman, he created a stink. The whoever had done it was damaging his cattle crossing. Well, he realized he opened the can of worms, and the Corps of Engineers realized he had dammed the canal. So in hindsight, he didn't make a good decision stirring a stink about it, whoever they were.
You remember when they had that big case down there, when the Broussards, I think it was after I think Harmon Roy was handling the case.
Yeah, that was Kelly Vaughn, Larry Broussard, Freddie Broussard, Alfred Broussard, and I think that was it.
Yeah, that was a freshwater. See, the canals came in and they didn't want to take the rigs and everything around freshwater by and all that. There was too many curves and,
Yeah,
so they made that canal. So the canal replaced a natural waterway.
yeah,
So whatever rights you had with and I think it was Vermilion Corporation that was fighting it.
Vermilion Corporation was didn't want people in the canals.
Yeah.
It was yeah. That was a pretty good stir there, and they won the court. I mean the
Well, yeah, they won it,
yeah,
but they didn't want to appeal it. So the named plaintiffs in the thing had, they told people that it only applied to them,
yeah, yeah. That was yeah. That was a. I'm not an attorney, naturally, all know that, but I don't know that if that ruling was ever actually recorded, was it?
Oh, yeah, it was recorded. Oh, yeah.
It is a recorded
Oh,
ruling?
yeah, it's a recorded ruling.
And that was Louisiana Supreme Court, am I correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, time passes, people don't really want to,
But they were going to take it to the U.S. Supreme Court, and Harmon they couldn't pay him anyway. So
so who was going to take it? Vermilion
the
Corporation was going
Vermilion
to take it?
Corporation was going to take it to the Supreme Court. I don't think the Supreme Court would ever heard it,
Right,
because that whole marsh is not owned by Vermilion Corporation or Exxon.
right. A lot of natural waterways, a lot of lakes, but,
Well, the whole marsh, I mean, it's according to the public trust doctrine, a state has a responsibility for all the navigable waters or the tidal waters of its depth sufficient to float a hypothetical toothpick at the highest tide of the year.
yeah.
So if you have that measurement, then the
Yeah.
whole marsh doesn't belong to anybody.
That's true,
And
but that would be,
in '05 when we had that big blowout in the Gulf, the landowners didn't get paid for anything because they didn't own it.
who didn't get paid for
The
it?
landowners didn't
Oh!
get paid.
Yeah, yeah, I wasn't aware of that, but yeah,
But I think the rice company in Crowley got paid $22 million. And they claimed that it messed up the marsh. Well, that was bullshit anyway.
Yeah, yeah, true. But, that was a good windfall.
Yeah, sure. And so, I think, what was it? It was, what oil company was mainly paying all the bills?
Oh, British Petroleum,
Yeah,
maybe?
BP,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That was,
It
that,
was Amoco,
they,
but
BP
Amoco was
bought them, I think, or,
bought by BP.
yeah. That oil spill made a few unexpectedly wealthy people there.
Yeah. I remember the advertiser called me and they said, we got a report that the oil had hit Louisiana, hit Vermilion Parish beaches, at Chineritig, and Audubon has gotten all kinds of equipment, to deal with it. Can you bring us out there? I said, yeah, I can bring you out there. So took the reporters out there. They had TV reporters, but we couldn't find oil.
Yeah.
We couldn't find a spoon of oil. Yeah,
That was a good payday for them, though.
yeah. But Audubon collected, I don't know how many millions on that thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So you watched the change occurring, huh?
yeah. And Jack saw a lot of it with me. We used to be able to take off walking from the ridge going south or what, today, you get in a Go Devil outboard or whatever, you can go pretty much anywhere as you want it in minutes, what used to take you an hour or two to walk it,
Yeah.
but you could walk. Now you can't walk the marsh anymore because it's almost waist deep water.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. The the coastal restoration program, they're responsible for all these dams and levees, and one project they did at Coles Bayou, the same bayou that the Trapper's Cabin
Yeah,
was on. They spent $38 million repairing a 305-acre open lake that came the result of,
yeah, regulating the water on it.
yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah,
But the impoundments, you see, is the problem. And they've done it all over the reserves. Rockefeller's one of the worst.
you say that,
'Cause see, a marsh, by definition, is subject to tidal exchange. If you take away the tidal exchange, you impound it, then how does it get fresh water?
right,
How does it get, the waves in the bay brings oxygen and fresh water into the marsh and, gives it its life, it dewaters at this time of the year. 90% of the plants, like millet and wild rice and all that, has a seed germination temperature of 125 degrees. Well, it doesn't occur in water.
right,
mean,
right.
that
And
never
and
happened.
rotting soil, rotting
Yeah.
vegetation.
Yeah,
But you're talking about water impoundment compounds, whatever. I never realized that, but south of the island, like where you came with me with those crab traps, just about maybe within a mile, 2/3, 3/4 of a mile south of us, I think it was Amoco that had levied in a couple of sections that was leasing it from Vermilion
yeah,
and pumping the water off. Now it is a big lake. The levees broke down and it just continued to erode back into the marsh. I forgot about that.
and I had a customer come to me, and they had leased about a section of land on the south side of Pecan Island, and it had levees and all, but it had broken. The levees were broken, and so they spent about $60,000 repairing the levees, putting a pump system
Yeah.
and all that. And I said, "You're not getting ducks." Yeah, he said, "How'd you know?" He said, "Well," I said, "you killed all the food."
Yeah, that was, and you know, like when my grandfather and dad and uncles and all of them, when they would spend a lot of time in the marsh trapping and everything, it was like an annual cycle. You know, you'd get your rains, that, you know, in the fall would flood the marsh. Late winter, early spring, you know, the marsh would start drying out. Seeds would sprout, they would grow, and it was up above what would later become the water level. When the water would come back on it, all your plant was above the water level, so they continued to thrive. And you had your wild rice for your duck, for your millet, you know. And it was, since I was a kid, it was great hunting. Now you have to hunt a lot harder to kill your ducks than we did when I was much younger hunting out there.
Yeah, we used to, I mean, I remember we had clouds and clouds of ducks would come. We were in a marsh that Hurricane Audrey had just demolished, you know,
Yeah.
and we'd, we'd kill so many ducks there that, you know, it was I had to kill 100 mallards, you know, and it was real dry, and south of the locks, we killed 104 ducks with I think it was 10 shots. And they were coming into the real small ponds. And the marsh had gotten real dry.
Looking for water.
Yeah, they're looking for water.
You know, that wild rice, like we've been talking about a little bit, it's thick vegetation. When the growing conditions are right, it's real
Yeah.
thick. And those ducks would come in and they'd make little burrows to get under that heavy vegetation to eat the rice on the ground.
That's right.
My grandparents, they used to spend the winters in a little shack out in the marsh. You know, they'd trap muskrats. And he had told me, if I was a little kid, he was talking about how they used to trap out there. He said he would creep up, he'd see where all the ducks would be funneling into that one or two little spots where they'd get up under that grass. He said he'd creep up on it and jump on that little area and he said, and the ducks would all be trying to make their way back. He said he'd just grab them and kill them. I said, well, how you fill up a drum of ducks to process for the winter, wringing their neck? He said, you don't didn't have time. You just grab them and bite the head, throw them on the side and grab them. Okay. So I was now I'm about 10, 12 years old. I'm a little kid. I'm hunting back there. My old dog. I went back on the horse. Anyway, shot a little duck, crippled it. My old dog went and got it, brought it back. I say, well, my grandpa would bite the head. I'm going to do that. I bit the head and that damn brain shot in my mouth, salty, hot. I never bit another duck's head again. I was going to do like my grandpa did. It wasn't a good idea.
Yeah, you could smash their heads with your thumb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but anyway, he said they would take a wooden drum and they'd find a wild pig in the marsh, shoot him, melt the hog lard. He said they'd clean the ducks and make a layer at the bottom of that drum, heat the lard and cover that layer. Put another layer of ducks, covered it until they'd fill the drum up with ducks. He said they'd eat it all winter. I said, well, how do you keep it? He said, it wouldn't spoil. It would be in the lard, so they would just fill a layer of ducks, dig your ducks out of that hog lard, and use the lard that you cured your ducks with to cook with. Different times.
Remember the geese, you know, the geese would be so numerous. You could go, I remember we'd go to Teague, you know, and before autumn got real rough with allowing people in there.
Yeah.
But you could go on the Teague Canal, and south of the camp, there'd be geese as far as the eye could see.
Thick.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
You know, about even 50 years ago, which I never thought I'd live to 50, much less be looking back 50
Yeah.
years ago. But anyway, you could go out there and on the beach, you could get like a little piece of a school section and burn it where your green shoots would come up and those geese would come in for sand. And everybody would limit out every morning, and you'd come out, you know, and the next morning you go back and the same thing, just shoot your limit and come in. I can't even say for sure a goose has been killed in that area in the last 5, 10 years. It's just, We no longer have the big migrations that we had in times past. The vegetation getting worse, maybe the feed is not as abundant as it was.
I think that they would feed on three-cornered grass and their roots, and and that disappeared
Yeah,
from the marsh completely,
yeah,
as well as millet and wild rice and all the other plants. I think in a healthy marsh, you have 250 different species of plants in a freshwater marsh.
The last time I saw any of that three-cornered grass was that year that you and Sarah came down to the camp, and the marsh is a drought. And we'd rode my four-wheeler back in that marsh back there, back of Cypress Point. There was a little patch about a quarter mile square, I guess, that had three-cornered grass, but it's not common in the marsh anymore. Where it would grow is underwater now.
Yeah. And I think that's a plant that dies off every year, so the muskrat loved it,
Yeah,
I think the muskrat lived on three-cornered grass.
yeah,
And I think, the fact that the impoundments all over the country has impacted the marsh a lot. LSU did a study, I think in the early 60s, that looked at deposition in the Gulf, and the average deposition in the Gulf was 30,000 years, was 30 feet. And the deposition on Louisiana's coastal zone in that same time period was 670 feet.
of loss.
No, not of loss, of fill. You were getting
Okay.
2.2 feet
Build,
per
yeah,
century. So in 2 centuries, you had 4.5 feet. And if you raise the marsh 4.5 feet, that's where oak trees grow.
yeah, yeah,
And so the movement of the rivers, you can go to Lake Foss Point, and they have an oyster reef in there. And you can go to the Indian mounds, which are the Indian mounds are pre-pottery. And I can say that, we've taken several scientists out there. They were purposely looking for pottery, but they had oyster shells.
instead of it was,
Yeah.
like you said, pre-pottery.
And pottery goes back 4,000 years, 3,800 years, something like that, So you have some big Indian mounds around Pecan Island.
Yeah,
And on the northeast side of White Lake, there's an article in the Abbeville Meridian about they're picking up those shells to make the road from Intercoastal City to Perry, and then from I think Esther to Little Prairie.
yeah, it cuts across. Yeah,
That was 1931, 32, and somebody brought in a real nice skull, and it was obviously somebody young and had great teeth and all that kind of stuff. And the editor of the newspaper asked, "Where'd you get this?" And he said, "Oh well, the boats that were dredging up the reefs, the shells from White Lake, and the mound was a square mound, and it was about 250 feet on a square, and the diagonals were north, south, and east, west. And then from there, it went to the round mound, which was about a half a mile and the round mound was a burial mound. So when they went to look at it, and the Chell Morgan took them out there, and he evidently had a powerboat that would get there fast. And so when they came out there, the barges had what looked like 1,000 skeletons, And they thought the comment from in the article was the bones of the savages will work as well as the shells to
Really?
smooth our ride for a modern automobile.
That wouldn't go over the day too good, would it?
No.
Digging up a burial ground.
Yeah. And it was the only instance where they had built a road from those 2 miles to the woods about a mile to the north. The only instance of, in archaeology, the area from those 2 miles where they built the road because evidently they needed to travel it. And
Yeah. So that's between Esther and Abbeville, and from Esther across to
And old
Cow
man
Island.
Gooch would pay the kids that lived along the road, he'd give them 25 cents a 5-gallon bucket. And he must have had 200 5-gallon buckets, the
Of-
artifacts that came from those roads.
Wow.
And somebody stole it from Gooch when he died, and they dumped it in the bayou.
Really?
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting to look at that history. And in 1949, LSU did a study of the Vermilion as the westernmost track of the Mississippi.
Yeah.
And in that article, I mean in the report, they dedicated about 2 pages of the report ridiculing the state for selling the pyramid mounds at the mouth of the Vermilion Bayou. And so I got a copy of the article because I was fighting for children.
That's the one that was like 250 square or whatever with their
No, different
different
mount
amount. Okay.
altogether. And I don't know, this was taken out in 1949 because I remember as kids going up and playing on them. Supposedly John Lafitte came there and would, on the top of the big mound, there were 3 mounds, and on the top of the big mound, they would display their wares, and the farmers up the bayou would come by from John Lafitte.
Really?
Yeah.
There's you hear a lot of tales about Jean Lafitte, Jean Lafitte.
Well, there's when I was around the Mosses, everybody got excited. Maybe you can remember. Maybe it was before you were born, but they were blowing up the oak trees at Pecan Island because the story was Jean Lafitte had
Buried
hidden his treasure underneath.
Yeah, I'm confident that a lot of holes has been dug between Esther and Grand Chenier on ridges looking for that. No telling how many holes has been dug looking for Lafitte's treasure.
Well, I mean, nowadays you'd have the equipment
Yeah,
to
yeah.
to
You know,
Chenier Teague had a bunch of stories from it.
I wonder how deep that sounding equipment is.
I don't know. I mean, I have a metal detector, and kind of amazing what you find with a metal detector. But the technology has gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
You have technology that'll find gold, find all the different metals, and if you can it'll tell you how deep it is and what it is.
Really?
Yeah.
Like it could a metal washer to a silver dollar. It would.
It would tell the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a.
And it'll tell you whether it's lead or, what metal it is.
Yeah. I went out. Somebody wanted to go around Grandpa's old place when and it would beep, so he knew it was metal there, and he'd dig a little bit, and he'd find an old bolt or whatever, but it wasn't a description of it. It would just let you know there was some kind of metal there. But
The, the Indian mounds, like the alligator mound, when Pecan Island was discovered, they went to the alligator mound, and I guess the marsh was a lot harder then than it is now, because the alligator mound is on Grand Lake.
okay, that's west, yeah.
It's kind of on the, just in Cameron Parish. And but that alligator mound, when the guy that discovered it, they had 147 skeletons that were on top of the mound. So that had to be some shipwreck or something,
Got blown off course in a hurricane or something?
Yeah.
Okay, that's in Cameron Parish, you said, Alligator Mound.
Yeah.
Which one was there's one on the east end of White Lake, am I correct? A shell reef or something there? What is, am I close?
No. The alligator mound, I thought it was on the southeast side of White Lake, but it's really on the southeast side of Grand Lake.
Okay. That's probably 12, 15 miles difference in, really.
Yeah. The biggest survey error in the Louisiana Purchase was right there at White Lake.
How so is that?
And I think in the 30s, the state sued Louisiana Furs over it. And Louisiana Furs had acquired the property from the original patent holder who had bought both townships. And you had, I think, 11,700 foot error north-south.
Yeah.
And 800 feet west. The early maps showed the western boundary of Vermilion Parish and Cameron Parish was in White Lake. That era put it on the edge of White Lake.
Right. That is where it passes.
Yeah, that's where it is right now. And so, kind of an interesting area. I think Michelle had bought the original. And White Lake is privately owned.
Yeah.
And,
Whitney Bank or something?
Whitney Bank, yeah. Whitney Bank formed Vermilion, I think Vermilion Acadia Irrigation.
Yeah,
they were selling water
fresh, well,
to the rice farmers in that whole area.
yeah.
And
That was a big canal system.
that's right.
It was, yeah. They would, and even as the elevation in the terrain would change a few miles later, they'd put another pumping station to pump it across a levee to furnish it further.
Yeah,
They had
yeah.
2 or 3 like that in the country. I mean,
Yeah.
it was over a larger area, but
Yeah,
yeah.
but you got one oil well in there that's on their land. It's kind of in the middle of the lake, and its production, the actual yield when it was first brought in, was $1.5 million a day.
Oh, well, I guess they got a good return on that investment, huh?
Well, there's still over $1 million. I think right now with the price of oil up, it's still $1 million a day. So they made a lot of people rich with that well,
Yeah,
including Whitney Bank.
yeah. Yeah,
But the owners of a bank can't own property like that. In 1917, Michel sold it. I think he paid 12.5 cents an acre for it. He only kept it a year, and then sold it to somebody for 50 cents an acre, and then somebody bought it for $1 an acre. And this in 1917, they lost it, to the bank, and the bank knew they had that cash cow, so the ones that I think used their political might to get the White Lake impoundment built. And I don't know if you were around before that was ever, before the Pecan Island Road was part of that impoundment.
Yeah, I'm sure I was a puppy. I mean, a very young kid. But I remember an old gentleman from down there. I knew him well. He's been gone a number of years. But they were talking about that Mermentau River Basin and about where they were going to put the locks and this and that to control that. And so the old gentleman says, well, he said, you can't do that. He said, the water will just run into the Gulf. He said, no. He said, what are you going to lose for a levee? He said, Pecan Island. The whole guy got mad. And he said they were friends, family, they was friends. He said, pack your stuff and get out. He sent him back to his house. He was furious. And he's right. They keep that water about 2 foot. They shoot for 2 foot above sea level.
That's right.
And I mean, you think of how many thousands of acres that stays flooded from Intercoastal City to Lake Charles.
That's right. It's 1,000 square miles.
Yeah.
And that's kind of probably the biggest impoundment in the state.
Yeah, so I'm very familiar with it, where we rode that four-wheeler back there. That's all part of that,
That impoundment.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I know it messes with our marsh bad. It used to, it would dry out every spring and summer.
Yeah.
I mean, from when I was a kid
Yeah.
to early adult, till the impoundment finally reached its desired level or whatever.
Yeah.
But now it takes an extreme drought, maybe over 3 to 15 years, it dries out. We're used to it was an annual occurrence.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm familiar with it.
And you see, when there's a UL study that was done in 1952, the impoundment was put together in 54, and then the Pecan Island Road was finished in 57.
Correct.
So, but the road, it took off all those little coops,
Yeah.
and but it was making that they just closed those, and they enclosed the freshwater bayou.
Yeah.
Freshwater bayou went into White Lake, and the Vermilion Parish Museum, they have a record of somebody that built a boat at Chinyaratee, a 30-foot sailboat, and he finished it in about 1890, and he sailed it. His target was getting it to Galveston, and he sailed into freshwater bayou. He had to wait 2 days to get into Grand Lake. Then from Grand Lake, he went down to Mermentau and into the Gulf to get to Galveston.
Wait, he built it where? In Grand
At Chinyaratee.
Chinyaratee. Came up.
No, he sailed it to freshwater bayou.
Okay.
The old freshwater bayou comes
And
out.
came up into White Lake
Yeah,
and then into Grand Lake.
into Grand Lake, and he had to wait 2 days to get a high enough tide to get from Grand Lake from White Lake to Grand Lake.
Right, cross that marsh where they
They
probably had
crossed.
dug to get through these little lakes.
Yeah, and then down to Mermentau.
Yeah. Well, that's beyond interesting to me. That's because I'd look at those old maps and I'd find that freshwater bayou, but it would always show it would play out getting close to Pecan Island. It wasn't on the map on into White Lake, but I knew I could find when I was younger.
The road killed it.
Okay, because I could find we would hunt nutria and stuff when I was young, 12, 10, 8 years old. We would hunt nutria in what used to be an old bayou, but it never was on a map. But I mean, so I was hunting nutria in freshwater bayou and didn't know
Right.
it. That's beyond interesting. That's nice to know. And you said it's in a museum somewhere? I could read
the
on it.
record. Yeah, you could go to, I think it's the Million Parish Museum, has the names of the guy that did it, and I think he was a Vincent. You remember the Vincent that the game warden?
Oh, yeah,
He was
Wade.
Wade
Yeah.
Vincent.
Knew him well.
He was a teacher at Trinity.
That's right.
He was the last teacher, and he didn't have a teaching degree. He just finished high
Just
school.
been out of high school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but he taught there 2 years, and they only had two families. One of them had 14 kids, and the other had 15.
One of them was Evine Guidry, probably.
Yeah, it was a Gidry, and I don't remember the other. The other name was, I think it was. Anyway, I gave them their first Cokes. I think the first time we went to Shinnery must have been in the 50s.
You know about,
Because Leontine Moss was born there, and she was a Lee.
no, I
They
don't know
had
that.
the Anchor Inn.
Anchor in Delco, maybe?
No, it was
Intercoastal City.
Intercoastal City.
Okay. You know, I guess in about 1960, I knew of Evine and his family, but I never really knew him. But in about 1960, they finally moved from Shinnery. Vermilion Corporation had a little camp on the east end of the island on the Front Ridge, close to where Columbia Gulf is now. They moved from Shinnery to that camp on Pecan Island. But his kids, they hadn't went to school in
Yeah,
10 more or less years, So they had to, they all entered school and kind of got caught up in stuff. And matter of fact, one of his daughters married a classmate of mine. But yeah, that was
I can remember
that was pretty extreme.
I gave we used to, I guess it was around 1950, because where the canal ended, they'd have an old truck there.
That's kind of like on the North Ridge.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it was, and because you had several ridges. But then it had most of the homes and all, and the tower was there, and you could still climb the tower. The Coast Guard had a tower there
yeah, for World War II.
from World War II. Yeah. Win Hawkins organized the Cajun Coast Guard. He organized about 150 trappers from Cameron to Shinnery.
My old grandpa did that for the war. He'd walk that beach. You had to have I think a horse maybe, and a shotgun or some form of firearm, and strong legs.
Because you could ride the beach with a horse real
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah. And they'd get to them bayous, they'd just swim in all them old marsh horses, it was no problem for them.
Yeah. The history with that area, I think Father Turlings was a priest originally there, and he was a priest from Shinnery to Cameron. And at Grand Chenier, I think this was the 1890s. And when I think Shinnery, the people left because Progress, they didn't have electricity,
Right,
didn't have roads,
right.
and but Progress had just isolated a place like Shinnery. And there was a proposal to build a road, I guess, from the locks to,
Yeah, I guess they're 30-ish, more or less, years ago, more or less, might be a little more, I'm not sure. But there was even some realtors selling lots out there.
that's right, White was selling lots.
Elridge?
Elridge White, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't know who it was, but I knew there was some lots for sale. But it's just difficult, to say it's difficult to get there is an understatement.
Yeah, that's right. 'Cause Audubon won that case.
To keep Elridge out.
Yeah.
I know it stirred a little. I know Elridge, he's gone now, but I remember that was in the, I guess, 60s when he lost that case.
Yeah,
And he had access through the Gulf, so
that case had a big impact on the Morse. 'Cause it set a precedent. It allowed the privatizing canals. And you know, it wasn't the Audubon, it was the McElhennys that were involved in that, you know.
okay.
Yeah, because the camp is on McElhenny property. It's not on Audubon Reserve.
Audubon's camp is on McElhaney.
Audubon's camp is on McElhenny property. And every year they have some big event for all the federal judges in the area.
Hard to buck that.
Yeah.
But I remember when I was in high, that, I mean, it was in the 60s when they was trying to build a pier out there in the Gulf to have access to their property
That's
out
right.
there.
Yeah.
And, you know, it just,
Maxie Pierce had a camp there. And Maxie had a tractor there. And he was, the helicopter people would bring him out there. And he let somebody use the camp, and they also, he let them use their tractor. And they brought the tractor to the boat, the tide was low, and the tractor went out there, and they somehow left it next to their boat, and it wouldn't start or something, and the high tide
Came
got the
back.
tractor. Yeah.
so that ended that tractor.
Yeah. But Max's camp, you know, one of the hurricanes took it. And it was behind the ridge, and you had to go through the oak trees, I guess, about 100 yards to get to his camp. And it was way up on piers and everything, but it took
Yeah.
it.
Well, that old hotel they had, that elevation must have been pretty high right there.
17 feet, yeah.
Yeah. Because I know it had weathered a few hurricanes,
Yeah,
and it never really got beat up that bad.
yeah, it was, I think those ridges like that. But seniority has been a good friend. He's writing a book on the 17th century Gulf of Mexico, and Chinurity is listed as a source of fresh water.
Fresh water, like,
Yeah, they're always looking for fresh
yeah,
water.
your ships.
Yeah, the ships. Yeah.
That's,
Then they had Marsh Island had one of those Trappist cabins. It had an artesian well, and it was a big pipe, and it was flowing with a lot of force.
yeah, fresh water.
Yeah, yeah.
You said Chinurtig had fresh water.
Yeah, it was
A
listed.
well or an
No.
artesian?
I guess it was a natural well.
So it would naturally float.
Yeah. They used to raise peaches there, watermelons, cucumbers. They'd use the cattle barges to take the watermelons out.
One of the Segura ladies, maybe Hazel, you familiar with the family, wrote a book about Chinurtig.
Yeah. That was,
And I said Hazel, I mean, it's a name I'm familiar with. I'm not sure which one of the sisters did that, but wrote a book growing up on Pecan Island. And
It's Lynch. Zoe Lynch. Zoe
Yeah.
Segura.
well, Harold,
Hey.
I enjoyed chatting with you.
Yeah.
It's good reminiscing. But yeah, the Pecan Island has definitely changed a lot. I witnessed a lot of change down there. And I'm sure there is a portion of good change, but I sure miss the way it was. The marsh the way it was, the annual drying where we'd have our wild rice and everything come up, natural feed for the ducks, for the
You all
geese.
did a study where they had 100 5-minute trawl drags, and this was done in July. So they averaged like 279 shrimp per 5-minute drag. So I mean, if you're talking about 50 count shrimp,
Yeah,
then you know.
30 seconds.
But anyway, we would go trolling in there, and you would hit them as you caught them, but we'd get enough shrimp to last us a year.
yeah, fill up.
15 seconds.
So thank you, Sonny, for
Oh,
being here.
I really enjoyed it. I
Yes.
really enjoyed getting together with you like this. And
5,
have a great week.
Yeah, thank you.
we got it.
Got it.
Wrap. That's a wrap.